This is the final word. It's story time number 219 with Jeff Lemon and Adam Collins. It's the middle of March. It's creeping up to the Ides of March. We've talked a lot about Julius Caesar on the show in the last few weeks. Both Julius Caesars. There may be other Julius Caesars. We've only talked about two of them. If you know of more, let us know. We will look into them as well. The show is brought to you, as usual, by Maurice Blackburn. Blackburn even. Maurice. But Maurice Blackburn.
Maurice Blackburn, yes.
Ian Maurice Blackburn. The Nissan Cedrics Blackburn. Maurice Blackburn, the number one plaintiff law firm in Australia. You'll hear a little bit more about them later. But we're going to get into a show today, story time, the history of the game, the stories of the game. Hello to you, Adam.
Hello to you, 219. So for a long time, it was the case that Australia had two opening batters who both had the highest score of 219. So that was Mark Taylor. And Slater, that's it. So Taylor, when he batted all day with Jeff Marsh, 300 for none and all that in 1989 at Trent Bridge, and then Slater, which was Ricky Ponting's debut, the Sri Lanka Test match at the WACA in 1995.
Only a few weeks ago, we had 219 as a number before it was on 219 the show, and you know if I'd been thinking about it, maybe I could have shifted that around. But basically, we just do the numbers as they come in. We try to just keep the order as it was off the sheet.
Yeah, authentic. Of course, Taylor's high score would be augmented later in his career, going on to make that unbeaten 334 in 1998. So that's the episode we're up to. Jeff, a little quirky one before we get into it. You know, the other day how you were doing the Poms Batch story, and I said, Nick Stone had been pulled out of the crowd, the Hawthorn player, to commentate. They got a message in from Pete and Queens, who we met last year at the T20 World Cup. Nick Stone is now like a millionaire. He started He went to, long story short, got an MBA, went to the States living in New York, and he surveyed hours and hours of people buying coffees at Starbucks to work out exactly what was going on, what the market was. And he basically started up a coffee chain in New York City with a view to having Melbourne-style coffee in New York City. It's called Bluestone Lane. I must admit, when I was there last year, I didn't come across it, but that's Nick Stone. So he's gone on to bigger and better things than when he was the Mandarin-speaking Hawthorn fullback who got pulled out of the crowd in 2002 to commentate. He was commentating in Mandarin, but then to play an AFL game on the same afternoon. So there you go, all inside the same week.
And his name was Stone, and he got to start a company with Stone in the name, which I'm sure was extremely pleasing. I'm surprised he didn't go for DeGraves Street, but yes, I suppose if you're looking for the kind of thing that tourists are going to put into Michael Google, that's probably the way they're going to go. Bluestone Laneways, coffee, blah, 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 milk crates, get some milk crates. Do it St. Jerome style, cushion on a milk crate out the front of the door in New York City, authentic.
Long neck of Melbourne. That was always the go there, wasn't it? It feels like a long time ago since that was part of my life, but happy time. The Bruno era, you could say, as we were talking about on Storytime last week. So it's 219, Jeff, you're first up, and you are doing an answer.
226.
226, yes, the show's 219, the number's 226. Ryan Smith, who is a new pledger, and there's a clue for you which reads 226 or $2.26 was going to be my pledge, and my clue is my first ever one-dayer I saw as a child. Right, so maybe there's something in the fact that it was going to be my pledge, or is this just a sentence framing thing? Anyway, you can let it rip.
Okay. Early 2000s is the hint from Ryan Smith as to an ODI that relates to 226. So this could be Australia having a very comfortable day out against Zimbabwe in 2001. I'm going to say this is probably January, a tri-series game. The freak, Ian Harvey, takes 4 for 28 off 9 overs. Of course he did. Darren Lehmann was opening in a time when a lot of people tried opening the batting at various times in the Australian one-day team. 92 not out. They made 226, chasing 224 to win. But I don't think that would have been one that stuck in the memory as much. Let's go back.
It sticks in my memory, Jeff. That Zimbabwe, my word, it does. That was the first one-dayer in Melbourne of the summer, and it didn't matter that they were playing Zimbabwe. The etiquette was that was the Bay 13 day, where people just piled in there. I came up from Warrnambool. I just moved to Warrnambool, maybe 2 or 3 weeks beforehand with my family. It wasn't a long stay. We were there for about 9 months. But anyway, I went up to on the sort of 6:30 a.m. train. As soon as the siren sounded on the southern stand side of the ground, we all piled in, laid across the seats and proceeded to have the day of days. I remember it being, there was a big thing in that. I remember that commercial where people would, I think it was a McDonald's thing, like Bob, 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 and waving their arms to someone on a beach, and then someone would see the other person and start doing it as well. Anyway, it was a thing a quarter of a century ago. Pretty sure it was a McDonald's ad, and some guys around me started doing it because they were, I don't know, they were pissed at idiots, and that became a thing in that part of the ground for like 10 years. Well after the commercial stopped airing, and like lame claim to fame, it was the guys behind me who started it on that day in 2001 against Zimbabwe. So, yep, a fond memory of being there. It was like 40 degrees as well. And looking through it here, it was Simon Kadich's one-day international debut. Love that. Someone, of course, we've had a lot to do with, and continue to have a lot to do with, is the great Simon Kadich.
Loved playing against Zimbabwe too. Took 6 against them in a test match. So, yes, 92 not out for Lehman, 226. I'm going to wind this back to the middle of the year 2000. The middle of the year 2000? Yes. 6 months earlier, under the roof. Under the roof, we talked about it only last week. Australia, South Africa at Colonial Stadium / Telstra Dome / Etihad Stadium / Marvel. I don't know what the second bit of that is now. The Docklands, the roofed stadium at the Docklands, where last week we talked about Steve Waugh and Michael Bevan bringing up one-day international centuries from consecutive deliveries, the first time that had happened in ODI cricket. But this is not that game. This is a game that happened, I think, 2 days later, 3 days later.
It was definitely 2 days later. So the first one day was on a Wednesday arvo where we all basically wagged school to go. And the Friday was the second one-dayer, and I couldn't go because this won't clock as to why. August 18th was the game.
I'm going to come to this, in fact.
What's going on at the G?
Yeah, so I now know that you know, but I'm gonna come to this in the course of my story.
Right.
So
I was elsewhere.
Yes, I guessed you would be, and I guessed you would remember, but I haven't checked this with you. But at some point in the story, I'm going to let our listeners into what was happening on August the 18th at the MCG. That meant that Adam was somewhere else. You might be able to join some dots there. So. The Steve Waugh Bevan match was one-sided. Australia made 295, defended it easily. The following game was not one-sided. Australia were chasing. The Freak is playing. Andrew Symonds I assume he's still in his medium pace era at this point. Symonds. Shane Warne's there. Gillespie is back from an injury break, and Glenn McGrath is there. So it's a good bowling attack. South Africa battling early. They're 4 down. They've only got 95 in the bank at the halfway mark of the innings. Gillespie has bowled an absolute peach to get rid of Jacques Kallis, who's had a little wander down the pitch at him, and then the ball's cut in and taken out sort of middle and leg stump. This is Gillespie in the honed down era. He's got rid of the long hair and he looks sleek. He looks like a French nuclear submarine cruising in. And Daryl Cullinan's been caught by Warne rather than bowled by Warne this time for a duck off Symonds. So they're 4 down. They're in some trouble. And then Jonty Rhodes and Mark Boucher each pass 50. They put on 80 odd together. Jonty's doing some of it with a runner, which is interesting. Like the most nimble and fit man in world cricket at the time had to have somebody else do the running for him. There's an absurd shot he plays with this cross bat sort of slap off Glenn McGrath for 6 down the ground. McGrath is not happy about that. Eventually gets him out, caught at deep square leg, and McGrath's doing the shaking his head, looking really pissed off thing when he takes the wicket. And then Boucher is facing Ian Harvey, absolutely rockets a drive at Shane Warne at cover, and Warne somehow hangs onto this catch. So they get those two out in the 50s. But as well as making the runs, Boucher has dislocated Michael Bevan's finger via a dropped catch in the deep early in his innings. So this is another contribution that Boucher makes. Gillespie 3 for 40, Harvey 2 for 43. South Africa make 226, our number. Australia confident in running it down. This is the Gilchrist and Mark Waugh opening the batting era. Substantial opening stand. They make 78, but they do it relatively slowly. It takes them a bit over 17 overs, and Gilchrist is subdued 37 off 60 by the time he's out. He's caught off Kallis. Ponting comes in and also struggles to score. Mark Waugh's out for 48, trying to smack Nicky Boyer, the left-arm spinner, over mid-wicket for 6 and gets caught on the rope. So everyone's struggling with timing on this surface. Damien Martin and Ponting put on another 30-odd, and then they keep trying to push the pace and wickets fall. So Martin charges at Nicky Boyer, who's at his peak. I used to really enjoy watching him bowl in this era. He's clever. He has all the finger spinners adjectives. He's wily, he's canny, he's foxy, he's all of those things. And he darts one in, gets Martin to run past it as it keeps low, hits leg stump. that classic sort of left arm orthodox around the wicket using the angle. And Ponting's got them to 164. They're only 3 down. They're chasing 227, but it's a 39th over, so they're going at 4.2 and over. They need another 63 from 72 balls, which is doable, but it's not completely simple given the pitch isn't that easy to score on. They've got 7 wickets in hand, so they should be able to accelerate, but when they try, things get out of control pretty quickly. Roger Telemarcus, fast bowler, I reckon he's worth a story time on his own.
Yeah.
He's had a fascinating life in a range of ways, good and some very bad. Roger Telemarcus, one of the lighter things he's known for is that he once had to get a ball replaced in a match because he was hit for 6 by Cullinan and the ball landed in a frying pan full of hot calamari and got soaked in oil. So there was a long delay while they had to change the calamari ball. Roger.
This could be the. I was going to say this could be the episode title. Roger Telemarcus's calamari.
I'm pretty sure it has been. I'm pretty sure it was a Daniel Norris episode way back when. And so we're looping around to it. We're at Storytime Inception, where finally I understand what that story means, which was recorded while I was on holiday at some point, and I never actually found time to listen to that episode. So I was always wondering what it was, and now I know. Anyway, he's taken a bit of tap from Gilchrist early. He comes back on and he bowls Ponting with an absolute beauty. Good Yorker, goes right through him. Ponting's well set, and this one tails in a bit, on-off stump, knocks him over. Simons walks in, whacks 6 over cover, and then he chops onto Klusner, and then Klusner has Ian Harvey pulled a deep mid-wicket and get caught. So they've gone from 3 down to 6 down. They've added 29. They've soaked up 7 overs in the process, and much of the crowd have wandered off to watch something else on the TV, which is where I was going to come to a question for you, which is there was a mention in the match report about football finals, and I was like, football finals on August the 18th. But it's the Olympics that year, isn't it?
It is. So they brought the whole AFL season forward a month to enable the Sydney Olympics to be in September. So August 18 was the second week of the finals. We finished 8th and played Geelong in the first final the previous week at the Docklands and won. A famous victory for Hawthorn. Actually, it was our first time that we'd won a final since, first time we won a final for a long time, because we didn't win a final in 96.
Barry Stoneham's last game.
Barry Stoneham's last game, that's dead right. There was the 50-metre penalty where there was a telling moment in the game where a Geelong defender threw the ball back over Barker's head and he got brought up to the goal line. Glenn Bowyer snapped from the pocket, which was the best moment of his career. But the second week of the finals, we're playing North on a Friday night at the G, and North are the reigning premiers, and they got off to a flyer. They were leading comfortably at halftime, but if we lose by 10 points in a high-scoring game, if that match goes for 5 more minutes, we win. Like, we're coming home with the proverbial wet sail. And don't quite get the job done. So needless to say, I didn't care a jot about the cricket. I was sat there in the Ponsford stand, the old Ponsford stand, in the cheer squad behind the goals. Remember just being gutted that we were a couple of kicks away from, but also excited. Brett Johnson was our best that night. He was a young player, didn't really go on to have a huge AFL career, but Daniel Harford played well. Paul Salmon's last game, the big fish, of course, he went back to Essendon and played a couple of games weirdly. When he came out of retirement, but his last game for Hawthorn and made our team of the century. So lots of memories of that night. A bit of a through line back to something we were talking about before, the one-day international at the Docklands earlier in the week. I neglected to mention this the other day. I went along with a bloke from school, a few guys from school, one of whom, I hope he remembers this, he listens to the show, I think he might even be a patron, Tim Phillips, who has gone on to be named like multiple times the bartender of the year globally. He has this massive global presence. He's an ambassador for Johnny Walker these days, but he's had a bar in Sydney and the Rocks in Sydney and turned it into this behemoth, successful business, and lives in Europe these days. But yeah, he was, from our high school, I talked the other week about famous people from Lindale and, James Gwilt and Johnny Farnham. Well, Tim Phillips should be on that list. And I went to that game of cricket with him. And before he became a world famous bartender, the other thing he was kind of famous for was the Herald Sun doing a feature on him for his antics in Bay 13. He to go back to what we said before about January 2001, where he kind of gave the skinny on how people smuggled booze into the G, and the various carry on and getting kicked out of there and that type of thing. So not sure if that article still exists out somewhere. He probably doesn't appreciate me mentioning it, but it was a funny moment in our youth when all of our antics were ventilated to the audience of the Herald Sun. But yeah, a couple of different touchstones in this answer. And g'day, Tim, if you're listening, you probably are.
Never let on the secrets about how you smuggle anything anywhere. That's my advice. You don't want to help improve the methods that are there to prevent it. So this is happening. The end of this footy game is happening at around about the same time that the end of this cricket match is heating up. So at this point, the wicket of Harvey, Australia need 34 from 29 balls, and they've got Bevan coming in at number 8 because he's got that damaged finger, so he can't hold the bat properly. But he's joining Steve Waugh, who's still there. And Steve Waugh decides to gun for it against Shaun Pollock in the 48th over. Shaun Pollock misses a Yorker that gets glanced to fine leg for 4, and then Steve Waugh baseballs him over deep mid-wicket for 6. Absolutely nails that one. So they've gone from 26 needed off 15 to 22 off 14 to 16 off 13. And suddenly, difficult equation for Australia looks like a gettable equation for Australia. And Shaun Pollock turns to Andrew Hall, who's a tall all-rounder who looks like he should be quick, but isn't. Bowls relatively medium kind of pace stuff and hasn't played a lot for South Africa at this point. It's his 9th ODI. He didn't bowl in 3 of them. He's never bowled a full 10 overs. So he's not totally occasional. He is there to bowl some overs, but he's not there as a front liner. So to turn to him for the second last over of the game, this is a big deal. It must be an instinctive move, and it works. He keeps the pressure on. He gets a little bit of movement. Michael Bevan aiming an on drive, nicks a ball, second ball of the over. He's out. Shane Warne has to come out and face the bowling. Can't get off strike a second time. So 4 balls in the over, 3 dots and a wicket. And then Warne gets a single, which puts Steve Waugh on strike for the last ball of the over. And he's got to make that decision. Does he try to take down this delivery? Does he try to keep strike and take it down in the last over? He goes for it, shuffles down, walks past it, swings over the top of the ball, loses leg stump, like the Nicky Boyo one earlier, and he's out. So Warne is on strike. They need 13 from the final over to win. Now it's South Africa's game because they've got Pollock to bowl the last to the tail, except that Shane Warne absolutely crushes a cover drive first ball of the over. He backs so far away. He's like a metre outside his leg stump by the time he plays this shot. He's got the knee of the pad almost on the turf, and he nails it over cover first ball. And that makes things a little bit more interesting. Single off the next ball. And then the Pollock Yorker goes astray again, down leg side. Gillespie gets a bit of bat on it, glances it for 4. So suddenly they need 4 off 3 balls. And this is Australia's game again. And it keeps swinging back, one way and then the other. Gillespie gets a Yorker and all he can do is dig it out. So he goes the sacrifice run. He hits it out towards short cover. Pollock's after it and Gillespie just sprints and goes, well, either I'll make it or I turn over the strike. And Pollock throws the stumps down direct at the non-striker's end. So no run, but they've got Warne back on strike with 2 balls to go. Wide Yorker. Warne throws the bat, squeezes it out down to deep third. Bill Laurie's up immediately. It's 4, he goes. And then he goes, it's 2. As the fielder's come around, hasn't spotted the fielder who's cutting it off. So they've got 2 of the 4 they need. 2 to win from the last ball of the game with Pollock, who gets his Yorker just about right. Not quite. Gets the line right, crucially. And Warne smacks it and probably hits it too well, if anything. He hits it dead straight and he nails it into the non-striker's stumps. And I reckon he's got enough on that if it gets past the stump, he's getting the second run between mid-on and mid-off, but it deflects directly to mid-on. And so they've only got time to run the one before the ball's come back in and Pollock's standing there with the ball in his hand. And it's a year, a month and a day after the semi-final of the 99 World Cup. And once again, Australia and South Africa have tied, this time at 226. Pollock afterwards says, I should have defended that. I like to think that 9 times out of 10, I'd defend 13 off the last over. Well, this was the 10th time out of 10, and he didn't. South Africa go on to win the third match, which is also a nail-biter where they defend an even lower score. They're defending 207 They've got Australia needing 9 runs at 9 wickets down with Lee and McGrath batting after 48 overs, but Australia get docked 2 overs for a slow over rate. So they only get to face 48 across the innings. Tied series after the tied match at the Docklands. They only ever played 2 more winter games at Docklands against Pakistan in 2002. They played 7 more there. New Zealand, Sri Lanka, South Africa again, the World 11 have all played there, but that's all been in conventional cricket season, more or less, some as early as October. But that's that as far as cricket under the roof, which seemed for a minute during this series like it might be the thing that would take the world by storm. Cricket in the winter under the roof. It's going to be huge, and they never went on with it for whatever reason. That was that.
Yeah, it was proof of concept, right? I've just realised something when you were talking about the timelines there. I mean, that Geelong Hawthorn final was, 4 days before? Well, it was a Friday night, wasn't it? So, and the first one day was on the Wednesday. So they've turned around Docklands in 5 days from being, remember, it was Death Valley that season. It was only in the, and that was a headline. I think that was a Craig Hutchison
first season
line,
of operation, wasn't it?
Yeah, so much happened that year. I wrote an article about it when the Docklands turned 15 for Inside Football, my first year of sort of freelancing years ago now. That was the year when Gerard Whateley was escorted off the concourse when doing a live cross because I was so sensitive about people reporting on the surface of the Docklands. Hawthorn St Kilda, which was about round 15, got moved from, it was going to be a Saturday night game at the Docklands, and they moved it to a Sunday Arvo game at the G at the last minute, because they didn't trust the surface.
That's right. It was sandy as hell.
Really sandy, yeah. Death Valley was the Craig Hutchison line at the time, I think.
That we harked back to during the Big Bash season this year when it was similar.
Yes, that's right. But to think they were able to take it from being a troubled football ground, in the middle of August, and 5 days later play international cricket there. We were only a few days ago discussing the challenge of making sure Adelaide Oval's right, after one bump-in day, and that's pristine. Go back a quarter of a century to a ground that was just finding its way with the technology under the roof and that type of thing. It's kind of remarkable that actually happened. But anyway, there you go. And one more thing in relation to your bit there is Andrew Hall, really interesting cricketer, not least because he nearly died a couple of years before that in a mugging where he got shot point blank range and the bullet lodged in his hand and didn't hit him in the face. Some remarkable story that he never should have survived the shooting. I remember that when he first played for South Africa, and he went on to become a mainstay in county cricket as a coal pack later on, play for North. I think he captained Northants later on. So he had a long career. But yeah, in those early days, he was, I guess he was, without denigrating him, he was the budget Jacques Callis because he did very similar things to what Callis was doing. Probably a better bowler, a more frontline bowler than Callis in the way he was utilised for South Africa, and obviously didn't do anything like what Callis did with the bat. But a great time for South African white ball cricket, nevertheless.
I think he might be the fourth of the Malinga 4-in-4 when Malinga nearly wins a one-day absurdly at the death. He took 4 wickets in 4 balls and then couldn't take the 5th, and they managed to win it 9 down. Hall's in that 4, but I think he might be the last one. Yeah, I can't quite remember. Anyway, that's my story. I suspect we're going to need to go to an early break.
Let's do that.
Before we do that, Maury Bees.
Yeah, why not? Maurice Blackburn Lawyers, Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm, who have the lawyers to look after you in the event you need to talk about super insurance. And, there's no easy way of depicting the scenario upon which you might need super insurance. It's probably going to be a really tough time. Logic would suggest if you need to leave the workforce in a more permanent way due to injury or illness. And this is where having Maurice Blackburn in your corner to work out your insurance entitlements through your superannuation is absolutely crucial. They're vastly experienced with lawyers who have been doing this for years. And making sure that you can get your entitlement at the right time in a timely manner and the full complement of it, and you don't end up with red tape and being denied by insurance companies and all the other complexities all the other complexity that can go with accessing insurance at the best of times. And in all probability, this won't be the best of times at all. So that's why Maurice Blackburn invests so much time and energy into this part of their business. They're Australia's #1 plaintiff law firm, and what goes with that is that much of their work is on a no-win, no-fee basis. So you can be confident going to them. Offices all over Australia. All you need to do is search Maurice Blackburn Super Insurance to learn more. This is a really important a really important thing. I know that it's provided me pause for thought when talking about it in recent weeks, getting to understand what my entitlements are, and yeah, it's worth having a good handle on that in case something bad does happen in your life.
Yeah, and more than your own entitlements, what that means for your family and
Exactly.
other loved ones, people who depend on you. If you're unable to work for whatever reason it may be, links in the show notes. Check them out. We'll be back in a second. It is the final word. It's story time. 219. We're going to get into a number from Rhys Morgan. We're doing some new numbers because a lot of people have joined up over the last few months. So we've got some first-time pledges. We're glad to have you. Thanks for joining.
Yes.
If you want to be part of what we're doing, patreon.com/thefinalword. You can make a big difference to what we're trying to do across a busy year covering cricket all over the world. Rhys Morgan with $11.75. It's in AUD. There was not a clue attached as far as I could tell. So it's an open field. What have you got?
Yeah, I hope my voice holds out here. I've just realised in the first segment of the show that I'm a bit thin today. Usual problem, right? I've 2 young kids who are always sick and all of that. So I'll do the best I can, and we'll talk about 11.75. I'm going to take you on a bit of a winding road to get to our answer, although not as winding as I anticipated. I had some really rogue stuff about Albert Trott that I was going to throw in there, but I've jettisoned that in favour of talking initially at least about a favourite test match of mine to look at the card of and to think about the importance of 11.75, an old favourite trope of mine going to the test match number on story time. It's the definition of an era ender, and I'll explain why. We're going to August 1991. We're going to the Oval, my home ground, or one of my home grounds these days. The Windies are the tourists playing England. They've already retained the trophy, having gone 2-1 up going into the 5th Test match. But it's a great series. I mean, England win at Leeds to begin in really challenging circumstances. The famous Graham Gooch 154 not out of 252, carrying his bat in the second innings. And when the stats numbers nerds, sorry, I don't mean that in a pejorative way, I love those guys, crunch these innings and run them through their algorithms and databases and so on. This often comes up as the best test innings ever. I think the Stokes innings against Australia in 19 might have overtaken it by that model. But anyway, the point is that this is a really special part of Gooch's story against Marshall and Curtly Ambrose there at the end, Patrick Patterson in that attack as well. It's Graham Hick and Mark Ramprokash's debut, which them debuting together feels kind of fitting given that their stories intertwined through the 1990s as they picked and dropped, and both
they are the could have been champions, the two of them, really.
Well, they were champions when you consider they made over 250 first-class hundreds between them. It's just that at the top level...
Sure. There's always the levels
moments,
thing, right?
They had their moments, no doubt. I mean, Hicks 100 in Bombay, wasn't it? And Ramprakash at moments as well, and 100 against Australia a decade on from this in South London as well. But Lords was a draw. Robin Smith 100. I love that Derek Pringle took a fifer in that match as well, which jumped out off the card to me. At Trent Bridge, the Windies square it 1-1 thanks to Ambrose and Walsh. At Edgbaston, they win again. This was owing to a fearsome spell from Patrick Patterson and 100 from Richie Richardson. And in the chase as well, Viv Richards makes 73 not out, who, of course, is the captain of the touring Windies team. By this stage, he's 39 years of age, Jeff. Made his test debut in 1974, so it's a massive career. 17 years a test cricketer, and he was playing first-class cricket a few years before that as well. But all the way through until he's 39 years of age, still captaining that mighty Windies team. And I feel like, when you speak of Richards, he doesn't belong to the 1990s. It's one of those guys who tipped into a new decade, but he's the man of the 70s and the 80s, isn't he? Like the very fact that he's still playing in 1991.
Well. There's that oddness that Botham's there. Even Imran Khan to an extent. You really associate them with that. They are 70s and 80s, but it's not a tiny career to come in and win a World Cup in the 90s. That's Imran's most iconic moment. But he still doesn't feel like a 90s player in the same way.
But it is his farewell series, Richards. And it's not to say that he was not playing well. He had a really good series. 73 at Leeds in those really challenging conditions, 63 at Lords, 80 at Trent Bridge in a win, 73 not out at Birmingham in a chase. So it's not like on form he should have been leaving the team, but he decided to call it quits in England, where he played so much of his cricket, both for the West Indies and indeed for Somerset. Before the Test match, there's an injury, and Brian Lara is the spare bat in this series, as documented so nicely in the Lara book with Phil Walker that was released last year, which I still regret not having sorted out for a Final Word book club. We will at some point, Phil. I guarantee that will happen when I get my ducks in a row and start producing more book club episodes, and I intend to do that every few weeks over the rest of the year. Anyway, I digress. So Lara gets injured, though, right before the Test match and can't play. That would have been beautiful for me. You know how often we talk about players linking in the chain. Lara had played with Richards when he debuted in 1990, but Lara playing in Richards' final Test match would have been pretty special, you know, when you look at the impact those two cricketers had in the Caribbean and around the world, but it wasn't to be. Anyway, into this Test match, England make 419. Robin Smith makes his second 100 of the series. I had lunch with Rob Smythe, his co-author, last week, Jeff, which you'll like. Rob's a colleague of ours at The Guardian, listener to the show, great supporter of our work since we started. So good day to Rob, who I expect will be listening. Wrote that book with Robin Smith that we featured on one of the early book clubs years ago, before it was even called Book Club.
Before it was Book Club.
But that 100's up against, Ambrose, Patterson, Walsh and Marshall. We reflect on Holding, Roberts, Garner, Croft and other quartets, but that's remarkable. Ambrose, Patterson, Walsh and Marshall. On Mako, the latter there, his 81st Test match, Malcolm Marshall, and it would go on to be his final appearance as well. And he made his debut back in 1978. He's a bit younger. He's only 33 in 1991, but this goes on to become his final Test match. Another player who is an icon of the late 70s, but especially through the 1980s, where he was the number one bowler in the world. And I think statistically, he's still ranked as having been, how they do those retrospective rankings of who was the highest ever. I think Marshall's got the second highest peak ever or something ridiculous.
Right.
And he was consistent through the series like Viv, right? It's not like Marshall was it's not like he was deteriorating. He picked up 6 wickets in that Birmingham win, for example. And I know, having watched that Leeds innings from Gooch before, that he was just as dynamic and quick then as he was through the middle of the 1980s. The Windies were rolled for 176, though. Now, this is the fun of the Test match, really. Desmond Haynes actually carried his bat for 75 out of the 176. But the real story here is the one of Philip Clive Roderick Tufnell. And Felix White writes beautifully about Tufnell in 91 at the Oval. In his book that we also featured on the show a number of years ago, It's Always Summer Somewhere. Thinking about Tufnell and where he sat in English cricket at that time, he had all of that scrutiny in Australia the previous winter, where he'd made his debut, and, there was the Phil Tufnell Fielding Club and, a bit of a parody figure, even though he nearly bloody won England the Test match at Sydney when rolling through Australia the second time and taking a cheap fifer and unlucky not to get a hat trick. There was a dropped catch, I want to say, that denied him a hat trick in that second innings as well. But he's recalled for the Oval Test match, his first match in England, because that's what you do. It's a bit like Sydney, Jeff, that, if you that time of year at the Oval, pick your spinner. Pick your spinner.
Kerrigan's got to play at the Oval.
You've got it.
Steve O'Keefe's got to play in Sydney. Ashton Agar's playing in Sydney. Mason Crane's playing in Sydney.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Scott Borthwick's playing in Sydney.
Scott Borthwick's playing
and that type of thing. And it's been the same at the Oval over the years, especially in August. And you look at the pictures of this Test. I watched the highlights back on YouTube, and it looks like old-fashioned Oval. It's not quite sort of 1976 barren as it was when Richards made his 291 there, but it's a different era. It looks different through the television because the grass is yellow, and it makes sense why they wanted to have Tufnell in the team. Now, I said they're all out for 176. At one point, they're 1 for 95. And predictably, you mentioned both of them before, old Golden Bollocks. I wouldn't call it a half tracker, but it's a short wide ball outside the off stump. And predictably, it's Nick's behind, because that's what both of them did. Got wickets with balls that, especially deeper into his career, got wickets with balls that others wouldn't, because he had that aura about him. So an aging both of them opens up the Windies. And they keep attacking, though. They keep going. But Gooch holds Tufnell back. And when he does bring him into the attack, top edge, first ball, wicket, bang, he's into it. And then he rips through them. So Viv's batting down the list due to illness, coming in at number 8. Tufnell gets him with a fly to delivery, thick outside edge. Alex Stewart moving off to his right. Great catch. And from there, it's truly mesmerising stuff from Tufnell. Saw a video that the ECB filmed with Tuffers a couple of years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, with him bowling with Jack Leach. And without putting too fine a point on this, and I said this to him at the time, he's still England's best finger spinner. Like Tufnell is still a beautiful bowler. He's probably in his late 50s now. He is a gorgeous bowler, Phil Tufnell, even now. And the loop and the flight and the dip, it's all there. You talked about Nicky Boyer as a man with guile. I reckon Tufnell version 1.0 had all of that. It's kind of a shame that for various reasons he didn't get to maybe meet the potential. He took 1,123, I think it was, first-class wicket, so he could seriously play.
Christ almighty.
Seriously bowl at Middlesex, where he did most of his work as a domestic cricketer. But yeah, he goes on to just run through the Windies. Massive collapse. Both of them takes 3 catches that slip off him, throwing it up above the eye line and claims 6 for 25, including the last 5 wickets for the Windies to bring on this massive collapse. And the smile and joy on Tufnell's face as well. I don't think there were many days like that for him as an England cricketer, especially the way that decade played out. He was often in trouble and, a figure of fun and parody. There were great days like at the Oval in 1997. I'm not saying there weren't moments for him, but there were a lot of tough days. And you go forward exactly 10 years to 2001, his final test match at that same ground against Australia. And in his final spell, Mark Waugh and bullying him, punching him back over his head for a couple of sixes. And that's where it ends. But where there are fewer smiles there. But you go back to Tufnell at the very start, and he did have that magic dust about him, which is often forgotten. They do go on to follow on the Windies, and the reality check was there for the bowler we're talking about. 1 for 150, the same figures as Warne on debut, if you like these bits and pieces. So they did get themselves into the lead in the test match. A Richie Richardson 100, Viv Richards 60 in his final test innings. He was picked up by Sid Lawrence, who bowled so quickly and so well. We featured the story of Sid Lawrence on the pod a couple of times and what might have been if not for that horrible broken leg in New Zealand. He picked up 5 wickets. England was set 146 to square the series, and they got it 5 down. There was a wobble. There always is with these things, but Ian Botham predictably was out there at the end, a boundary from the one ball that he faced, 4 not out. And it proved to be his final test match against the West Indies. He played one more summer, but the last time that he and Viv, his old best friend, they played so much cricket with each other at Somerset, against each other in England versus the Windies, and that was that for those two on Viv's final day as a test cricketer. Malcolm Marshall's final test wicket was Graham Gooch, leg before wicket, so Marshall finishes with 376 wickets at 20.9. Viv finishes with 8,540 runs at 50.2. So those two great measures of a test great bowler, an average near enough to 20 and an average for a batter above 50. So I said off the top it was the end of an era as the Windies were sort of transitioning away from these two great standard bearers, and so it was, and they squared the series 2-2. So retained the trophy, but it was a far more competitive summer than it might look otherwise when reviewing how many series in a row where the Windies were undefeated. Final thing before we finish this answer, because it was 1175, I just thought, this will be interesting to look at November 1975 in the context of the 11th of November 1975. I don't know why this jumps into my head, Jeff, but
Armistice Day.
Armistice Day, but the day of the dismissal, the Whitlam dismissal, Remembrance Day, 1975, when the Whitlam government was dismissed.
With Chaminda Vaas played by Malcolm Fraser and John Kerr playing the role of Kazia Hayat. Popping the finger up for an absolute shocker.
So as I said at the top, end of an era as those two great West Indians transitioned away from Test cricket as the standard bearers, and yes, a series that they still retained the trophy, winning those 2 Test matches in the middle of it. But 2-2 completed a really fun, interesting summer for both teams, and one that many people look back on very fondly. And Phil Tufnell having that special day, 6 for 25 in Test match, 1,175 for Rhys Morgan. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Rhys, for getting involved, and Justin English as well, who is a new pledger, and contrary to the name, much like Josh Inglis, has pledged in Australian dollars. The number is, I think it came through as a $3.50, which is a standard one, as in the default pledge when you sign up in AUD, but it has a different number attached to it.
Yeah, so Justin says here that he's 355, so he's altered the number for the clue. Relates to a bloke sent from heaven. You won't need any more clues than that. I'm looking forward to hearing more about this legend. Now, this is Justo. This is a man who's been name-checked on the show quite a few times in the last 6 months. Justo, who drove Baz to the Wacker last year when Baz was looking for a ride to get to the ground or something like that. And was very present at our live show last year. We had a beer with him afterwards, and he's been a correspondent of mine since. So welcome aboard to our patron page, Justo in WA.
Goodo. If you're here on this show, if you hear Sent from Heaven, obviously the first thing you think is Michael Bevan, who appeared in my first answer and could appear in this one, Michael Bevan Made in Heaven. But that's not it. That's not it. I'm confident that's not it, because 355, obviously, iconic number in Australian cricket, because Dennis Lillee, 355 test wickets, should have been 430, whatever it was that I said, once you factor in all of the matches that got taken away from him. But a different number than that, a coincidental, a rhyming number, is that Big Joe Angel, you have to say big before you say Joe Angel, it's the law, test cap number 355. And if you're looking for somebody sent from heaven, an angel is who he would be looking out for. Now, you may know him if you're a big fan, big listener of 91.3 Sports Breakfast in Perth. You might know Joe Angel from popping up here and there to chat about the cricket with Wayne Clark, because like Wayne Clark, he played a few test matches and a lot of domestic cricket sending down fast bowling. But mostly people would know Joe Angel from the bowling that he did for Western Australia, especially through the 90s. We've talked about Joe Angel a lot. He's one of those pound-for-pound cricketers who, in terms of an international career, is probably overrepresented rather than underrepresented in story time. You know, there might be sort of all-time great players like probably Zahir Abbas has probably had 5 mentions in 200 episodes. Joe Angel's probably had 40. Just the way that things have panned out, particularly, Adam, with the story that you've told on the show before about procuring his Australia A helmet when you made the Australia A podcast and then auctioning it off for charity, which listeners, long-time listeners to the show will know that tale.
Yeah, I mean, the long story short here is that we knew it had to be his through a process of elimination. We went through the Australia A list. This was on eBay, and we got it bought for us, or did we buy it? I don't know how I got it. Someone gave it to us. Like, Gilly will remember exactly how it played out. And then it was it feels like, you know, the catastrophic bushfires of the summer of 1920, which preceded COVID, right? So we were raising money for the bushfires, not knowing that we were on the cusp of a global pandemic. And it was those old Albion helmets have a size written inside of them. And I think from memory, the standard size is size 5, I want to say. Like most human beings of an adult nature have a size 5 helmet that they wear. But this was like size 7 or something like that. And we're like, There's only one person that can be Big Joe Angel. We never confirmed it with him. We've got a good photo of it got taken into the SEN studios by Bretto and by Gilly. And I woke up to these photos of them having done SEN to talk about the helmet and talk about Australia A. And Jared's wearing the lid. So the first photo I see is Jared wearing the helmet in a photo they sent through to me, right? Because of course you're going to put it on, right? And that is the first thing I saw on my phone when Rach was like punching me, waking me up because it was pretty clear we needed to get ready to go to the hospital. And now that proved not to be the case. We ended up staying at home for another 12 hours before. But my first sign that Rach was in labour was seeing a photo of Jared wearing Joe Angel's helmet.
It makes sense. Heaviest head in the Western Australian squad, probably at the time, Joe Angel, who was enormous, 6'6", you know, famously like a heavy stride, one of those sort of pound the dirt on the way in. You look at a photo of Joe Angel, he looks like a cartoon of a friendly giant. He's got one of those giant heads with the sort of the big jaw and the big teeth and the big slightly lumpy smile, and he looks very endearing. He looks like somebody who'd be very nice to you. So, yeah, haven't met him, don't know, but that's the impression that I get. In any case, the Joe Angel thing, I mean, I remember Joe Angel being interesting to me just reading the scorecards in the back of The Age, you know, when I was reading Shield scores and so on, because Joe wasn't an abbreviation. It was just J-O. There was no middle name, and he was just Joe Angel. That's it. That's just his full name. I don't know how that came about. His parents were more inventive than others at the time. No Joseph, no Joss Butler origin story. And then the name Angel is an interesting name. It's common in Spanish. You get a lot of angeles in Spanish, and it stands out in English much the same way as there are lots of Jesuses in Spanish and not many Jesuses in English-speaking countries. You don't tend to name your kid Jesus. That probably seems like a bit much for the average English-speaking person, but conventions are different, and so it's just become normalised. So there's something about angel that I thought, there is a potency to the word based on how often it gets used in TV show titles in English. So I was going on a tangent today, Adam, wandering off, because I was like, obviously there's Angel, as in the Buffy universe spin-off from Angel, and shout out to Michelle Trachtenberg, who passed away a couple of weeks ago, played Dawn in the original show. Sad loss. There was Dark Angel with Jessica Alba when she was burning up television screens before Sin City. There was a point there where it was like Jessica Alba is going to be the biggest star in the world for like 20 years, which didn't quite happen. If you peruse the Jessica Alba discography, filmography, as I did today, I'm like, the quality and the prominence does dip fairly sharply over a long period of time.
As long as it was Dark Angel where she stayed and didn't go Dark Margot, which a lot of these people have at different points who've been in the entertainment industry, have like lost their minds and lost their algorithm and all that.
Yeah, old mate Dean, what's his name from Superman, and
Dean Kane's gone Margot.
Oh wait, like he's right on.
There should be a Wikipedia tab of like
kind of stuff.
Right, there should be a Wikipedia tab of like celebrities who have lost their fucking minds. Who was the on Neighbours who Dr. Carl was shagging? There's lots. But the first time he was cheating on Susan in the show, what was her name? Sarah. Brown hair, long hair. She was the receptionist at the doctor surgery in the show. Is Tubes here? He'll be in the chat. He'll tell me. Tubes will be in the chat in like 3 seconds here. Count it. 3,
sure. If there's
2, 1.
If there's a rugby league reference, or if there's a
he'll know. He'll know.
Reference.
So it was I think she was English, long hair, brown long hair. Anyway, so she has gone full alt mad, ranting at her phone. What do you know? Here comes Tubes in the chat. It is Nicola Charles, beautiful, right on cue. So so she's part of that world. Yes. Anyway.
Holly Valance also.
Holly Valance, yeah, same show.
Married a Russian multi-millionaire or whatever it is, and got very Trumpy. Old mate from Hercules, Kevin Sorbo. I'm going to say the caliber isn't that high. Like the in terms of the quality of the programs and the quality of the performances, it's not the creme de la creme who are going that way. I'm just going to float that contention.
Roseanne's one of them, isn't it?
Big time. Yeah. She's probably the most famous of the ones who've gone that way. Anyway,
we've got a cricketer as well, which we should. I mean, I feel bad almost citing this because he's clearly. No, actually, I won't even do that because it's not reasonable to name someone who's probably got other shit going on, who has become very enthusiastic on Twitter, especially about the merits of lots of various things that would fit into that tradition as well.
Right. Well, my impression is that Jessica Alba's gone the other way. She's very much into philanthropy and trying to do good things in the world with her profile, even as that profile didn't quite reach the level that I thought it would in around 2001. It's sort of cricketer who bursts onto the scene dramatically and then never quite works out. Like Sam Constas could be Jessica Alba in 5 years' time. Lou Vincent's kind of Jessica Alba. Ton on debut at the Wacker doesn't pan out. Not that Jessica Alba ever got convicted of corruption. She's had a clean record.
Quite the through line from Lou Vincent to Jessica Alba. There's your episode headline. There's your title.
There we go.
Don't forget it.
So I spent a long time today thinking, like, just pop quizzing myself of like what were TV shows or movies that had angel in the title. There was Touched by an Angel, which was that very mawkish one about like angels wandering around on Earth trying to help people and driving a convertible. It was pretty nauseating. Charlie's Angels, obviously. Yep. Angels in the Outfield, baseball-related angel material. Outlaws and Angels, Angels and Demons, Snow Angels, Drunken Angel, Fallen Angel, Teen Angel, which starred Jason Priestley, Lost Angels, Angels with Dirty Faces. That was a recent one. Angel at My Table. So then I got onto, I started searching for obscure foreign films with angels in the title. I found a Spanish movie where The direct translation actually means the sex of the angels, but it is translated very badly as angels of sex, which people seem really bad at turning Spanish titles into English titles. I know I've mentioned this before, but the famous La Casa de Papel, like the House of Paper, about robbing the Royal Mint in Spain, which gets translated to English as Money Heist. What is this movie about? It is about a heist of money. We will call it Money Heist. Anyway, Angels of Sex, this is the description. It says, the established relationship between university student Bruno and aspiring photographer Carla is thrown into turmoil when Bruno feels drawn to sexy karate instructor / breakdancer Rye. Complications ensue.
I expect they would.
If you wanted to create the most annoying person, like the person most purpose designed to piss me off, it would be a sexy karate instructor / breakdancer.
Breakdancer. Could be in the Olympics next time. The karate breakdancing category. Get it in there.
Could be in both. Could qualify for 2 sports. Why not? Anyway, it sounds terrible. I did actually watch the trailer and it looks pretty good. So I'm in. I'm going to watch. Angels of Sex after we finish recording tonight. There are lots of shows that have variations on City of Angels because that's what LA means. Los Angeles is originally Los Angeles, which is the angels, not even the City of Angels, just the angels. That's what it means. I also found that in California, there's another guy called Joseph Angel, who's generally known as Joe Angel, Joe with an E in this case, who's from Colombia, who was a baseball caller for decades and who made it his signature. His calling card was that he didn't anglicize the Spanish names. There are lots of Hispanic baseballers. So he, as a point of pride, said, they have Spanish names. I will pronounce them correctly, which most people don't. So anyway, That's the other Joe Angel who's still living in California, somewhere near Sacramento. Shout out if you're listening, baseball commentator Joe Angel. Good work with the Orioles for 19 years. Anyway, that's some background on Angels. Big Joe Angel was enormous. He had a long career, 121 first-class games. Doesn't sound like big numbers in the English context, but in a Sheffield Shield context, it is played 110 matches for Western Australia. Second all-time on the Sheffield Shield wicket tally behind Larry Grimmett, who always gets a mention. 485 first-class wickets at 25 all up, 419 of those in the Shield, which he won with WA in 92 and then made those 4 Shield finals in a row in 96, 97, 98, 99, won the last 2 of those and did get to play 4 test matches in a test career that didn't quite light up. He played the Windies at the Wacker in 1993 when they belted Australia by an innings. He played 18 months later in Pakistan, the famous Karachi game where Pakistan win by a wicket that we talked about or didn't talk about with Ian Healy with the 4 byes. The follow-up game in Lahore where Pakistan are forced to follow on and then make a massive score in the 3rd innings. Salim Malik makes a double 100 and it's pretty tough going all around for Australia. And then he finally, Joe Angel, gets a win in what will be his last test match, the Wacker Ashes test of 1995. It never blows up for him. 3 for 54, his best figures. He takes 10 wickets at 46, all up. A fair few of those are tail enders. The best players he gets out are Salim Malik a couple of times when Salim Malik's not making double hundreds, and Syed Anwar's the other really quality player that he gets. But as you will know, Adam, he is the bowler who should have had Inzamam to win that test in Karachi, not given in Pakistan. Surprisingly, that was the case. And then later in his career, he's the Patsy and the Brett Lee ascendancy story when Brett Lee gets picked for the test side. It's the match where he snaps poor Joe Angel's arm in half when Joe Angel's trying to block out a test match, a first-class match rather, to draw and gets smashed just next to the arm guard. And that's when Steve Waugh, who's in that New South Wales side, says, this guy's playing on Boxing Day or I will quit, which is what he told Jeff Marsh on the day. But yes, that's a brief look at both Angels and Joe Angels.
I'm always interested in cricketers that carry big Joe Angel, right? Like, who meets the criteria? I'm sort of struggling at the moment, but I have been Googling a couple of things here. There's a lot of, as I've said big before Marco. On the pod, big Marco Jansen, absolutely. Big Kyle Jameson. I don't know if people say that, but funnily enough, the one that comes up, the one that comes up most is Glenn Maxwell because the fucking Big Show. That's what comes up the most when you search on that. But tall cricketers. Yeah, big. Yeah, there's the subset of 2 metre
You've got to
cricketers.
be boxy enough as well, which Marco isn't. But you've got to either be like 7 foot, or you've got to be 6'6" and broad. You can't be 6'6" and 6'6" and slender. Like, Josh Hazlewood's not big Josh Hazlewood because he's not quite horizontal enough. He's vertical.
Because like there are a range of 2 metre Peters, isn't there? That's a subset, right? So there's Peter Fulton.
We named them all at one point on this show. We did it.
Peter Street.
Yeah.
Peter Wright, play for GWS. So, 2 metre Peters, there are a number, but for some reason, if you're going to be 2 metres tall, if your parents know it, call them Peter. Not going to do determinism. You can be called 2 metre Peter as well.
I've got one last little quirk of a question for you, Adam, on Joe Angel. Now, you know how we sometimes use the website Cricket Archive. If you're a real badger, that is the site for you. They do a thing sometimes where they license out the stats to county cricket teams so that if you search for a player who has a long county career, you'll get a club-branded version of the same page.
Lancashire, Surrey, Middlesex do it as well. Is it? Not that many, but yeah.
Yeah, but also state teams do it. Queensland do it. If you look up, I'd say Eddie Gilbert off the top of my head, it won't bring up the standard Cricket Archive page. It'll bring up the Queensland Cricket Archive page. Mm-hmm. When you look up Joe Angel on Cricket Archive, he comes up with a Middlesex page. Now,
I love that.
Now, and I was like, this is curious. So I looked at the seasons that he played. Never played a first class match in England. I looked at his List A. He's got 1 season in England where he played some List A cricket, 3 matches for Gloucestershire. Then I looked through, he's got 3 Lancashire League seasons in the early 90s. He's got a Liverpool Premier League season in 2002. And right down the bottom of the rabbit hole that I was digging in 1993, he played 1 match against a Yorkshire second 11 for a Middlesex second 11. Joe Angel, 3 for 62 and made 20 runs in a narrow defeat, playing in a team with Paul Farbrace and Gunnar Gould, Ian Gould, and now a coach and an umpire. 1 second 11 match for Middlesex, and Middlesex have claimed him and branded his page as a Middlesex player when he is Western Australia's greatest ever cricketer, perhaps. The greatest ever servant of the WA state team is being claimed by Middlesex. This is an outrage. This is an abomination.
The only theory I have there is that Joe Angel, so 93 Ashes squad included Wayne Holdsworth, who didn't play a test match, and he was like the spare bowler who couldn't get a Guernsey. Brendan Julian was there on that trip as well, played a couple of tests in 93, albeit as much as an all-rounder as he did as an out-and-out quick. Angel might have thought, let's get out there and try and do what Mike Whitney did back in 81. Let's bank on there being an injury across 6 test matches and get drafted into the test team. So you just wanted to be in situ near enough if they needed to call someone up. Sean Young in 1997. So the logic is sound, but clearly it didn't happen for him.
I understand why
couldn't snag a county deal.
But how is Middlesex claiming him? How are they saying Middlesex is Joe Angel because he played a single second 11 game when he's the highest ever Shield wicket taker for Western Australia? This is beyond lunch cutting. This is like kidnapping the caterer. This is wrong. Something has gone wrong here in the Cricket Archive system, and injustice needs to be.
How did he
go? It needs to be. I'm going to tell you who he got out. Yeah,
okay.
But don't look.
Okay. Right. Sorry.
I want to tell you who he got out. He dismissed Paul Grayson, who went on to become a coach at a lot of teams. He dismissed Michael Vaughan, who was a youngster knocking around, and he dismissed Big Dick Richard Kettleborough.
Oh, yes.
Who came up only a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about league cricket and Matthew Sinclair playing in the Yorkshire Leagues and how Kettleborough topped the run scoring the year after Matthew Sinclair. Well, here he is playing in a second 11 game for Yorkshire, getting knocked over by Big Joe in Big Joe's 1 Middlesex appearance. Richard Kettleborough cannot stop appearing on Storytime. He's a magnet to us as we are to him.
I did talk with Big Dick about his cricket. I don't know where we were, probably America, maybe Adelaide. Not that long ago, like in the last year or something like that. And he is an MCC member, and I think over time has played games from time to time, played for MCC. And I did say to him, come on, let's play a game together. So this summer, I'll try and play a game with Big Dick and add to.
Imagine when Big Dick met Big Joe. That could be your episode title.
He still wants to come on, we just got to get our shit together. He listens. He wants to do it. Dick, if you're listening, mate, let's just get this sorted out. We've got to get you on the final word before you get too busy with the England season and all of that. He'll be a great guest when we make it happen.
Anyway, that's Justo. That's Joe Angel. It may not have been the answer you expected, but it's the answer that you got, and it is time for us to take our final break.
This is story time 219. We have been really happy about the number of people we've recruited to Edinburgh, Jeff. We've been really happy with the training that people have been doing. Please, Adam, please remember to promote RJ's IPL game in the show notes this week. That's a note for me. That's a note for you. Okay. It's a note for DCA editor. Sure. AJ, who is one of our most enthusiastic fundraisers, he's done an absolutely brilliant job raising money for the Taverners. He's doing the half marathon again this year. He's arranged a 20-question IPL game, which I think you chip in 10 quid. I think it's 10 quid. And it's not complex. Even if you don't know anything about the IPL, and my hand's raised on that one, you can put in what you need to do, and it's a points tallied thing and that type of thing. And that's how RJ is making his nickel and dime contribution to the Taverners in our fundraising effort to try and hit 30,000 quid again. We got to 32 or 33 or 34 last season. I'd love to overtake that. I've set the target at 30, but you know what I'm like. I want to do as they do on the Good Friday appeal every year and beat the target from the year before it. So get involved. We recruited one more marathon runner yesterday, which was pretty cool. So I got a message from...
I thought spots were closed.
They are indeed closed. I got a message yesterday. Now let me find it here. I of course have lost it. I got a message yesterday from someone who wanted to join our team, who'd signed up to the marathon independently of me. And I'm like, yes, you can be our friend, and you will be our friend. So we've got one more marathon runner. That's Jason Wilkins. So thank you, Jason, for getting in touch. More conventionally, though, what you can do is sign up for the 10K with Jeff and with Rach. Rach is running every day at the moment. I'm running every day at the moment. Jeff will be running every day soon, or something like that. And
I ran it yesterday, and I may do it again in like 2 weeks. You'll be fine. You'll work it out. It doesn't take long to do a 10K. Like, genuinely, it's like a 2 or 3 week lead up. You don't need to worry about the fitness That's like
prep.
people who can catch cricket ball saying it's easy to catch cricket ball. It is for you. It's not.
I mean, more like the fitness space. The fitness space is not. It's not like you don't need to draw down on that horrible using the fats and stuff. You can do it on your glycogen, whatever it is. You can do it in a way that won't completely ruin your body. Is what I'm trying to say. 'Cause it only takes about an hour, something like that. So hopefully we get some more sign-ups for that. As you pointed out on the weekly show, Jeff, there is joint accommodation. And there are spots. So if this is like a last-minute thing, you don't really know what the vibe is. You never met Jeff or me before or anyone else, like, just get in touch, adam@finalwordcricket.com. I'll put you with the right people and you'll sign up and you'll bloody love it. You'll absolutely love it. We'll be around a piano singing songs with Josh Timmins before you know it, and everyone else who contributes to Will and Claire and others who play the piano, and it's a top weekend and the whole thing's brilliant. So be part of it with the Tabs on their 75th birthday. And we did get a message of encouragement yesterday from the great Chris Tarrant, not the one that played for Collingwood and Fremantle and all the rest, but the one who hosted Who Wants to Be a Millionaire over here, Toby's old man, encouraging us in what we're doing at the moment. So thank you to Chris, who's a great taverner, former president, encouraging us to get as many people along as we can.
Craig McGowan is your final pledger. Adam, $6.29. New pledger as well said, not sure how to provide my clue, but I will just say that my no pledge relates to an ex-Invincible who I grew up living on the same street as when I was little. I used to sneak down to his house and swing on their reclining swing on the front veranda when he wasn't home. Love that. Not quite as handsome as Neil Harvey, but still quite a looker and a handy player.
Craig, I'm going to say better looking than Neil Harvey to start with. What a gorgeous clue, like the imagery of like on the swing on the veranda there, and knowing it's a former Test player and so on. It must have been a lovely part of your upbringing, Craig.
Bit of early swing there.
Indeed. And there was swing with the bowler in question here too, which we'll get to. So, yeah, the clue about the Harvey looks lines up well because, Nugget Harvey with the dark hair. And our man here has that same defining characteristic, and they toured together in 1948. Now, not the first time we've talked about this cricketer, slightly different hook on this occasion. We're going to land on Ernie Toshack. Tall, suave. Sid Barnes, as in the Australian Sid Barnes, not the English one, who played with them in 48, described him as a film star. His nickname was the Black Prince, which probably wouldn't fly now because that was largely due to his darker skin. But you know what I'm trying to say. He was seen as a guy who had it all going on aesthetically. He was born just at the start of World War One, and he was born in a town in New South Wales called Cobar, which is where he grew up initially. I had a look.
I've got something to put in you. And the Cobar.
Let's start a war. I had a look. This really is middle of nowhere stuff. Like, if you were to describe a town in the dead centre of New South Wales, this would be Cobar. Usually I will use Walgett as a reference point when thinking about Western New South Wales due to Hey Dad and Betty, the secretary from Hey Dad. Well, this is like another 300 miles west of that. So we're right in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
Tough
it's
starting.
reminding me of just popping up into my head is my friend Goran. Hello, Goz. You won't be listening, but you know, who knows one day. Who's one of the most Balkan men alive. He's had this dream that he wanted to start a nightclub only for fellow Croatians. It would be called Crowbar. That was his. It's like, it's just too funny to not work.
Imagine, geez, that'd be fucking rugged. There'd be blues there. By 8 o'clock, they're punching on, throwing chairs at each other, all happening. Not to typecast Croatians as being angry and fiery, but you're all angry and fiery. Every Croatian I've ever known. I used to watch Melbourne Croatia play, and going back to our Tony Wilson interview from a little while ago. It should be compulsory every Australian Open, by the way, that there's some chairs being thrown around by the Croatian fans and the Serbian fans. It should be like guaranteed with your admission ticket you are going to start a brawl. Not to make fun of these things, but it was a fun tradition for a while there.
It was a beautiful understanding of self-satirization. That like really thick tuft of hair that used to come up out of the collar of the shirt that would kind of explode out of the collar of the shirt. Goz used to call that the Balkan vest. ready for anything. Got my Balkan vest on.
Cat's got one of them. He always talks about his Croatian blood and why he has such a short temper. He's got the Croatian or the Balkan rug going on. Anyway, Ernie Toshack, Ernie Toshack. He had a tough start in life. He was orphaned young. Ultimately ended up in Cowra, which is 500 kilometres southeast of where he was born. So, he's bounced around a bit, finding his way. Does bowl a bit of left arm seam down in Cowra. Doesn't move to Sydney till he's 30. So his cricket and his rugby league, he's played a long way from the Metropolitan Centre. Eventually he moves to Sydney at 30 and Marrickville decided to take him on in district cricket. Had health issues, which meant that he was deemed not fit for war service when that broke out as people were signing up in 1939 and 1940. So he got himself a more conventional job through the war. And he was ready to roll in 1945-46 when cricket returned, first-class cricket returned. And then things moved very, very quickly for him, which becomes a theme of his bowling spells as well. Things happened quickly for this left armour. Played 7 games for New South Wales in that first season after the war and took his wickets at 18, which was enough for him to be taken with the Australian 11 to New Zealand for what were initially going to be unofficial test matches. Now, as we know, Jeff, retrospectively, these were deemed to have test status, the first test matches that Australia played against New Zealand. So, I didn't know they were done retrospectively, actually. I thought they were just always the test matches, the first ones in New Zealand that Australia played. But it turns out that 2 years later,
between those post-war ones and then it's 20 plus years till the next ones, isn't it?
That's it. So these ones here, they're outmatched New Zealand. They get caught on a wet one at Wellington, bowled out cheaply in both innings and lose inside 2 days. So there's a huge gap there. I understand why they might not have thought of them as being test matches, but Toshack on what became later his test debut took 4 for 12 and 2 for 6. So, match figures of 6 for 18 to start his test career. Thanks for that. And takes 23 wickets at 10 across the series. I mean, that includes all the first class games that he would have played as well. So he's jumping the queue. He's moving quickly.
Well, a lot of them wouldn't have been first class. Those New Zealand tours, they tended to play. There'd be a handful of first class games, maybe against provincial sides, but then there'd be a bunch of other. They'd be playing Palmerston North and Lower Hutt and that kind of thing.
It's a great point. So the first class games that were on that tour, he got 23 at 10 and probably plenty more cricket besides. The next season, 46-47, he's an incumbent in the test team by definition of what he did in New Zealand. plays the first test against England, the first Ashes test since the war. Match figures of 9 for 99 in his first home test there at the Gabba. Huge win.
Forges, spotlight sale.
Yeah. Another theme in these Ernie Toshack test matches is when he plays well, Australia tend to absolutely maul the oppo. England are beaten by an innings and 332, one of the biggest test wins ever. He's bowling with Lindwall and Miller at first change. So naturally, Lindwall and Miller are taking the new ball. Miller taking 7 for 60. And then, he gets bowling first change. In the first innings, he picks up 3 for, which includes the England captain, Wally Hammond. Late career Wally Hammond.
Yep, reattached.
20 years after breaking his 20 years after he damaged his penis. So he bowled Wally. I had him lead before the first inning. No, he actually bowled him. He bowled him. And he got Edrich and Compton. So handy first 3 Ashes wickets there. Hammond, Edrich, Compton. Edrich and Compton, of course, who have the stands named after them at Lord's many years later. And then a 6 for, which was 6 for 82 though, so that doesn't actually match the figures that we're looking for. But still, there's a terrific test for him to start his Australian career in New Zealand, and another really good one there, 9 for 99. There are comparisons later to how Derek Underwood bowled. So we're looking at a guy who bowled what was known as medium pace then, so not quick, but with loads of variations, always in the game, used to bowl with a heavy leg side field, and would strangle teams and would run his fingers down the seam. He used to bowl leg breaks. So, I mean, I'm sort of thinking like James Faulkner style, right? He would run up, although, of course, Faulkner was more an out-and-out seamer than a slow medium. But he fit the bill of a guy who could make it difficult to score, have lots of variations, and had heaps of experience to draw down on as well, having played loads of cricket before he reached the top tables. So,
which arm's he bowling with?
Left arm seam. There's a point of difference as well there to what the other Australians are doing.
So he's in at the pads a lot and stacking the leg side field, and
that's
then
right.
Looking to attack down the line of the stumps.
He'd bowl with a 4-5, so he'd often have a leg slip and a leg gully and a short leg, and it wasn't like body line as such. It was more like he would have the catches ready for mistakes on the leg side, which was more common in that era.
From that angle.
That's it. So. So the 6 for here isn't the 6 for we're looking for, by the way, because the number's 6 for 29, and the innings analysis for him in the second innings was 6 for 82. Back in Brisbane a year later, though, this is where we're going. So he completes that Ashes series. He bowls well without being outstanding, with the exception of the first Test match. Keeps his spot against India at the start of 47-48. A test where Australia make 382 for 8 declared in the first dig. Bradman, 185, obviously. And then India are rolled for 58 in 21.3 overs. And this came up quite a bit, Jeff, when we were in Adelaide in 2019, because this was the previous lowest score for India against Australia. And it was an innings that was all over in 21.3 overs. And am I right in remembering that the 2015 test at Leeds was about the same as that, maybe a bit quicker? But yeah, there are a couple of historical markers that this test innings relates to. And Toshack takes 5 for 2 from 2.3 8-ball overs. So I think this was the fastest fifer in Test cricket before Stuart Broad's at that aforementioned all-out 60-day at Nottingham in 2015.
Yeah,
so he took
Nottingham was about 120 balls. It was so it would have been just over 20 overs, maybe 22, something like that.
It was a tweet, I remember that much. So it was inside 140 characters, which was the limit at the time. So, but yeah, Toshack's 5 for 2, which is just ridiculous, really, in 19 balls to get the fifer. And overtaken, I think, eventually by Stuart Broad. They follow on, and after taking 5 for 2, take 6 for 29 in the second dig to basically do it again, including Hazare and Lala Amanathan, the two greats of Indian cricket who were in that touring side in 47 and 48. And 6 for 29 is our number for Craig, who had that as the pledge off the top. India all out 98 in the second innings for another huge loss, an innings and 226 runs. So there's the Wellington win and those two Brisbane wins, which are gigantic, and Toshack dominates in all of them. 11 for 31 match figures, absolutely flying. But unfortunately, this is when he starts to have serious knee problems, which compromised what he could do. He still took 41 wickets in that season at 20, which made sure he'd be there in 1948. But this is when there are questions about his fitness. He ends up winning a vote 3-2 from the medical team to get on the boat to England. Imagine having a panel of 5 medical professionals dictating whether, like now, it would be nothing like
a split decision from the judges to give you 3-2. It's Rafter and Agassi in the semi-final.
So he did win 3 sets to 2 to get on the boat. And there's a famous story of him getting bored signing all of those mini bats and autographs that they were asked to do. So he paid one of his mates to do it for him, who spelled his name incorrectly, spelled Toshack without the C, just the K. So apparently there is still some memorabilia floating around out there,
right.
Which was signed on the boat, which has Toshack spelt wrongly because Ernie couldn't be bothered. And that
is it worth more in the old?
Oh, it must be.
The misprint's always worth more than the correct.
We'll throw it out to our Discord community. If you can find some of this stuff on eBay or whatever, I can tell you one person that's keen to buy it, me. So at least explore what it's worth. And this reflects his personality. He was a big personality who made a lot of people very happy, and he was part of that. He wasn't just a tourist in '48. Let's be clear about this. He was part of that attack, and he plays an important role. Which we'll come to in a moment, in one test match. Took a 7-for at Bramall Lane, 7-for in 40 consecutive overs. So again, this is against Yorkshire, but so he's not charging in, breaking his body. He's doing something slightly different. He's not a spinner, but he's definitely not, because you can't bowl 40 overs straight if you're a seamer without breaking yourself in two, right? So,
sure, but he's won the split decision from the medical judges, and then he's gone, I bowl 40 overs on the spin.
Good point. Very good point. And then he goes to Lords against the MCC, which performed something of a trial for the England Test team at the time at Lords, and he picked up 6 for 51 in what he described as his best bowling performance of the tour, which included getting rid of both Compton again and Len Hutton, who went all right. So once they reached the Test matches, it was a bit of a different dynamic, remembering that in 48 there was that quirk of them having a second new ball available after 55 overs, which was stacked to the advantage of Lindwall and Miller, the two out-and-out quicks. So he didn't bowl as much as he otherwise might have, but he was super consistent in the 4 test matches that he did play. But there is one opportunity for him to be a star, and this is back at Lords, where he picked up the 6-for against MCC. Keith Miller's unable to bowl in the second innings, presumably due to injury or something else. Either way, he's not bowling on that day. Toshack gets the new ball and takes 5 for 40, and they roll England for 186 to claim yet another massive Toshack-inspired victory by 409 runs to go 2-0 up in that series after 2 test matches. So in that spell, he gets Washbrook, Edrich, the captain Yardley. So on that honours board at Lords that's spoken about so often is on Ernie Toshack. I mentioned that knee injury by Leeds, which is the penultimate test match. He needs to seek surgery, and he gets it in England. They try and rush him back for the final test at the Oval, but they realise it's just not going to happen. So he doesn't play in Bradman's final test match, nor does he play for Australia again. He's 34 by this stage. He's obviously packed in so much in those 4 years since moving to Sydney. He did mount a first-class comeback in a couple of seasons after 48, and he nearly got back to the Aussie team, but his knee was never quite good enough. His tall frame, the variety that he had on uncovered and sticky wickets made him the perfect bowler for his generation. Big personality, especially when appealing. Crowds loved him. Bradman loved him too as one of his match winners. He went on to have a 25-year working career on building sites as a foreman and a supervisor. Passed away at the grand old age of 88 in 2003. And what a great person for Craig to know growing up in Hornsby, where Toshack lived, an invincible. And some nice colour from Pat Rogers to round this out as well, saying that Toshack is buried only 5 metres from his aunt and uncle. And given Pat's such a great historian on the game, that seems fitting that there'd be some family connection like that would jump up. But back to Ernie, 12 test matches for 47 wickets at 21. Great numbers. Some huge days, 195 first-class wickets at 20. The Southport wonder, and those best bowling figures of 6 for 29 for Craig McGowen, who used to swing on his porch.
Thank you, Craig McGowen. Your name reminds me of Shane McGowan of the Pogues. If Shane McGowan was hanging out on Ernie Toshack's porch, that would be an interesting story as well. Ernie Toshack, a nice name to say and a good story to tell. I'm going to do a quick little number here as well for Graham Parker, because he sent in 221, sent it in euros, so there may be a continental flavour here, but Graham said, have a free swing at my number. It does have a story behind it, which you almost certainly won't stumble on accidentally. So because we're entirely in the dark, I thought, I'm just going to have a little early foray because I know that my answer will be wrong.
All right.
And it just happens, Adam, that 221 is one of my favourite scores, one of my favourite numbers because of the individual innings scores that it represents, all of which are stories we have gone through before. But just a re-tour through them. Why does 221 sing to me? It's been made 5 times in Test matches, all in the men's game, none in the women's game. In order of least interesting to most interesting, Kumar Sangakkara in Gaul, 221, when he has that crazy run late in his career. He's about a year out from finishing up at this point. He's making all the hundreds in county cricket. He makes this one in Gaul against Pakistan in a streak where he makes 7 50-plus scores in a row, which was an early fascination of mine with Chris Rogers when he made those 7 half-centuries. Sangakkara's streak includes hundreds. Indeed, it includes a triple hundred, but he does make those 7 in a row. Then he makes a couple more 70s in 4 innings, and then he makes this double 6 innings before he makes another double in Wellington. So it's this mad rush at the end of his career where the runs are flowing. 221 made by Rob Key, now the man in charge of England cricket, whose only 100 was a double. We did an episode on every player whose only century was a double century against West Indies. The third one is Ricky Ponting's last one, the India farewell in Adelaide, in the same ground where he made a much more famous double 100 in 2004 against the same team. But this one was 2012 after Clark beat them up at the SCG with that triple 100. It was the subsequent match, wasn't it?
It was the match after Sydney was where Hussey Hussey made 100 with Clark, and then it was Ponting's double.
Ponting and Clark.
Clark
made a not double 100, made a single 100, and Ponting made a double there. You've got Brian Lara in Colombo in 2001. This was what came to mind when there was a point when you and Bharat on the daily shows were talking about Smith in Sri Lanka and saying where it would rank on best tours by a visiting batter in Asian conditions. And, there are a few that come to mind. Smith in India in 2017, Joe Root in that Sri Lanka-India stretch when he made all those runs there, Alistair Cook or Kevin Peterson in 2012. Could be up there. There's the Andy Flower series when he only plays 2 tests against India and makes an insane number of runs across those 4 innings. But my vote would be to Lara, 6 innings, 688 runs at 114 in Sri Lanka in 2001 against peak Murali, and nobody else in his team can play the bowling. And he, in 6 innings, makes 688 runs at 114. And they get whitewashed. They get absolutely thumped as well. They're losing games by innings. They're losing games by 10 wickets, and he still manages to produce that performance, including his 221. And most of all, Sunil Gavaskar at the Oval in 1979, the 5th test in the series, one that I've talked about a fair few times, this match on Storytime, where England declare and set them 438, and he only goes and nearly gets it on his own. India finished 9 runs short at 8 wickets down. They draw the game in the end. They're 49 runs away from winning when Gavaskar's out. They're only 4 down at that point when he's made that 221. And they do push on. They do keep going for it, but they lose 4 more wickets. They have a very ropey tail at that point. So with a couple of overs to go, they decide that rather than trying to get the runs, they've just got to shut up shop, even though if they win that game, it means they level the series 1-1. So the temptation was there, the fruit was there to grasp, but not quite. Almost one of the, it would still be the biggest run chase. It would have obliterated the record at the time, and they very nearly got it. So those are the 221s that are not your answer, Graham Parker, and you can start to get us closer to what your answer is.
Brilliant. Like doing that. It's a nice thing to bring in when we've got someone who we know we're going to get wrong. Have a frolic to begin with. We've got a confirmation from last week as well. Peter Newbold, 127, which was correct with me on Jimmy's final day being the 12th of July. Adam, or should I say Bruno, thanks for what you did with my pledge. And there was me thinking I have served up a very hittable full toss for you. I mean, it was, Peter, but, it isn't the first thing you think of, dates. It's kind of down the hierarchy of possibilities. But we got there in the end. That's all that matters. Pete said it was nice that we had 2 Jimmy answers in a row. and he'll give some thought to his next number that we may or may not be pleased to hear. No, I guarantee we'll be pleased to hear it. I really enjoyed corresponding with you last week, Peter. So thanks for getting involved in doing what we are doing. And of course, that Discord channel is where it's all popping off at the moment, patreon.com/the final word, which is by a mile. The best thing you can do to help Jeff and me keep doing, what we're doing week in, week out, with so many different types of episodes that we have ready to roll this summer, which is bloody exciting.
And it's the best way to get involved with what we're doing. We've got people in the Final Nerd community in arranging their trips to the Caribbean to be on the Australian Test Tour, arranging their trips from England to Australia to be part of the Ashes next summer. There are meetups, there are hangouts, there's Edinburgh Marathon weekend. There'll be matches in England over the English summer, in Australia over the subsequent season. It's all happening there, so get involved with Patreon first, then you can jump on the chat page. You can also get the feed without the automated ad breaks, and you can help us keep making the show. It's win, 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 win all the way down. That's it. That's the end of story time 219. Thank you, Adam, for your time. Thanks, Maurice Blackburn, for supporting the show, and thanks to everyone on Patreon who does it. Jump on there. We'll have plenty more coming up over the next few days. We'll have a weekly show early next week. We've got interviews and some back catalogue stuff from Adam, and on we go.
Yep, next couple of interviews will be very much worth your time. Have a nice weekend. Bye-bye.
Bye.